Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sports Legends of the Carolinas. I'm your host, Scott Fowler, sports columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where I've worked since 1994. And as always in this podcast, I'm traveling across the Carolinas, seeking out some of my favorite sports legends and asking them to tell the real stories behind their rise to iconic status. For this episode, we're back in our podcast studio in Charlotte, and I'm sitting across from Debbie Antonelli, the longtime ESPN basketball broadcaster who played college basketball under another legend, Kay Yow at NC State, and who now lives in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina.
Antonelli won the Women's Basketball Coaches Association Mel Greenberg Media Award, which recognizes a member of the media who has best displayed a commitment to women's basketball.
Debbie has broadcast college and pro basketball games for the past 35 years and has become so well known for it that she became a member of the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in 2022. In addition to her heavy travel schedule, Debbie is also a wife and the mother to 3 boys, including Frankie, who has Down syndrome and recently graduated from Clemson. Debbie's charity work includes an annual free throw marathon where she makes 100 free throws every hour for 24 straight hours in her driveway. By doing that and soliciting contributions for every free throw made, the 58-year-old Antonelli has raised close to $1 million for the Special Olympics. Don't forget to pre-order your copy of the Sports Legends Coffee Table book at sportslegendsbook.com. And here's Debbie Antonelli next on Sports Legends of the Carolinas. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Scott, it's so good to see you. I'm so honored that you selected me to spend some time with, and it's fun seeing you, remembering some great times that we had back in our Kentucky days when you and I were just getting started as a couple of young pups out there.
Boy, we were, weren't we? Debbie and I have known each other we were just counting up, but like 35 years or something. Back in our early 20s, we first got to know each other a little bit. You were Debbie Mulligan at the time, I believe. At Kentucky, I was a very green beat reporter at the University of Kentucky. Eddie Sutton was in the process of getting fired soon, and Rick Pitino getting hired. And what were you doing at that time at Kentucky?
When we first met, you're right, early 20s, I was interning to fulfill my grad school requirements from Ohio University. And then I was the first director of marketing in the athletic department at Kentucky. It was such a different role and job back then than what that title would mean today. But CM Newton hired me right before he hired Rick Pitino. So I just recently shared that story with Coach Pitino because I covered Iona in the men's tournament this year.
Yeah, right. That was, in the marketing department, it wasn't quite as fancy then at that point. Tell a little bit about that office that you had down deep in the bowels of that Coliseum.
Memorial Coliseum. My first office was underneath the bleachers, literally, and after a game, Coke would seep through the bleachers onto our office floor and desk. We had to cover everything every night if there was an event in there. But I don't think people would realize back then the things that we would do as interns and or as a director of marketing. Certainly, corporate sponsorship was different. Licensing was different. There was a whole different way of doing things that was so new, and it was all emerging. But it was a different time. There weren't any TV networks and things like that outside of ESPN maybe being just 10 years old. And it was definitely a different landscape. It's not what it is today, that's for sure.
At that time, Debbie, were you thinking your career path ultimately would be to become an athletic director?
That's exactly it, Scott. I came out of grad school from Ohio University with my master's in sports administration, and that was the career choice that I thought was going to be my path. I wanted to be an AD. And then my first year at Kentucky, the local cable company came in to meet with us and said, "We think we can produce sports, but we're not sure." And we said, "Well, can you do a women's basketball game?" And Gene DiFilippo said, "Do you want to do it?" I was 23 at the time. I was like, "Well, yeah, I'd like to try being the analyst." Now, keep in mind, during this time, there weren't any women's games on. There weren't any women calling games. I didn't see anybody like me that was doing that. So it was a new venture, and a new venture for me seemed pretty exciting, but it also fulfilled my love for the game and kind of pacified that passion for basketball. So I started doing games on the air, and then I was running this parallel path with wanting to be an AD. I had some basketball coaching offers. Wasn't sure I wanted to be a basketball coach. I was trying to figure it all out. And so calling the games on the air really fulfilled that void. And I just kept doing that until I made a decision after I went to Ohio State, to stick with broadcasting full time. You
would sometimes do games for free for $50.
Yes.
I don't know how difficult it was to make it work. I mean, weren't you a freelancer for a really long time?
I did freelance for a long time, yes. And when I first got started, like I said, there weren't any games on. And so if there was somebody that was willing to broadcast, or if we could expand the local cable to do some high school games, or once they figured out that they could produce some sports, then we started to find other opportunities. And then you'll remember the legend Jim Host got involved, and then we started selling baseball and some other sports to get on television. And it just grew from there. Got to a point where we had one kid, and then, the next kid comes. And after the first kid, I was working, that's my oldest son, Joey. I was working at Ohio State, and I really didn't think that I could travel and do my job with a baby like I was doing it. And how crazy is that? We started having more kids, and I travel more than ever inside hoops. But it just seemed to work, Scott. We figured it out. My husband was great, and we just figured it out. It wasn't something that was simple. It was definitely had its challenges, especially when our second son was born. But, I have great energy, and I had a huge opportunity to give it a try. And this is my 35th year. I just finished my 35th college basketball season on the air, and the first 28 were without security because I didn't have a full-time position with any network. I worked for all the networks with no minimum number of games. So, if the coaches went to a spring meeting and they said, we really don't like Debbie Antonelli on the air anymore, I could have been out. So now I have some security.
What is your exact position now?
I'm full-time staff with ESPN. Mm-hmm. So it took me a long time to get that. For the longest time, and you got to know how the women's side was growing, right? There weren't any games on. So I'm starting to do some games before there were any games on. And there were times during my first 28 years where I'm doing 85 women's basketball games, and ESPN's only doing 85 as a company. So there wasn't enough inventory for me to make that switch. I like to say, I think early on, I might have been the only person that ever told them no. If I already had a game, the loyalty factor to the packages that I had already committed to was really important to me. So even if ESPN called, I didn't just, drop this game and go over there and do that one because they called. And so I feel very fortunate that, all the times that I said no, eventually worked out where they did have enough inventory, and they did decide that they were going to give me an opportunity to be full-time.
Yeah, Jeff, I thought that Notre Dame was way too casual in the first half. I didn't think they played the kind of defense that they needed to play, but in the second half they turned it around. They went on a 21-10 run because they were able to defensive rebound and get out on the break.
What is a typical month like for Debbie Antonelli?
I don't like to count how much I was gone during that time because I don't want to lose my Mother of the Year status. No one's going to ever win that award away from me. I always feel like I'm going to win that. But just this year in a small sample, I think I was home 14 nights from Christmas until the end of the Final Four, the men's Final Four. So that's because we're empty nesters now. But back when we did have kids at home, we always had somebody at the house every day after school. I asked my husband if he would just make sure that he was there for dinner and bedtime, even if I couldn't be there. And there's great peace of mind in knowing that you have really good people around you helping. And we had that with the people that we had, staying at home. I never put my kids in daycare. It just wasn't a choice. It cost us a lot more money. We didn't have the money, but I felt more secure being on the road as much as I was, having someone at home that would just be there when they got home from school. And it's definitely different when mom travels versus the dad. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is. I don't know how else to explain it. there would be times when, my husband was great, but he might mix up the lunches, or the teachers always knew when I wasn't home. And I pretty much was very transparent because of my middle son, Frankie, when my middle son has Down syndrome. So advocating for him was a full-time, I might get off a plane and go over to school and have lunch. And I wanted to make sure I had a presence at the school just to keep an eye on things and to make sure that, he was getting the services and the appropriate education that he deserved. So that created some extra challenges. But I like to say I've never had a day off. I don't know if I have had one. And I live near the beach, and the day of going to the beach with a chair and a book has still escaped me. I have not been able to do that yet, but I hope that's in my near future.
Tell us more about Frankie and sort of the challenges of Kay Yow, I believe. Maybe you can start with that a little bit as to how she, I think, was instrumental at one point in this journey.
You know what, Scott, when Frankie was born, we did not know, my husband and I did not know that he had Down syndrome. The doctor came into my room finally on the third time. Each time he came in, he's like, how do you feel? Did Frankie look like Joey? I'm like, no, he didn't. How you doing? Good. He said, we're going to run a few more tests and then I'll be back in. It was almost like now when I look back at it, I think he was afraid to come in, and we had already called every family member that, how you call when the baby's here, and we didn't know. And then I remember the doctor coming in and telling me that he was showing signs and symbols of having Down syndrome, and I knew exactly what that was. I think I went into shock. Honestly, it was very scary. His health was a concern, and you feel like your future passes in front of you. You don't realize at the time what an incredible gift, and that God has chosen us. My mother said to me all the time for a long time, you didn't get Frankie for something you did wrong. You have Frankie for something you did right. And that was always encouraging and inspiring to me because, I at one point, I think there was some depression, and I think there was some, empathy, and there was some pitiful moments. And I'm not going to shy away from those now because I know what we've been able to do and where Frankie is and how he's thriving right now. And he's a college graduate from Clemson's Life program. It's absolutely amazing when you go 25 years back to where we were and what today parents have to look forward to, because 25 years ago, even at that point, the doctor asked me about an institution. I was asked that question, which sends chills down my spine to think about it, that people are forced to have to make a decision like that and would even consider a decision like that. That certainly wasn't anything we considered at all. But I did think that my career might be over, and I was concerned about my husband. I was concerned about our 2.5-year-old. How are we going to do this? How are we going to navigate this world we weren't prepared for? We had no knowledge. And it was staggering, to say the least. At this point, I had already resigned from Ohio State prior to Frankie being born. We had moved to Dayton. I was giving the radio and TV a go full time and to see if we could make it work. And we lived in Dayton, and my husband was working for Jack Nicklaus and a property that Jack had created in Dayton. And we were just trying to figure it out. And about 9 months in, so I'd started back to work, NC State and Kay Yow, because Frankie was born in 97. In the 98 Final Four, NC State makes it. Kay Yow finally gets there. Last of the good guys. Like, there's not a soul in the game that did not appreciate or like Coach Yow. You never heard a negative thing. She cared. She treated us as people first. That's the way she expected us to treat everyone else. She was an incredible teacher. She never yelled. The court was her classroom. Her motivation was more around disappointment. Like, I can remember going into the locker room at halftime, and it would kind of be like, do you think you could rebound better? And do you think you could, like, can you stop turning the ball over? Yeah. And, everybody's going, yes, yes, of course. And then by the time you get done, you're like, yeah, we can do it. Yeah, we got you, Coach Yow. Don't worry about it. And so they make it to the Final Four.
Where was it?
Kansas City.
Okay.
Louisiana Tech is who they play in the semis, and Louisiana Tech absolutely demolishes them. I mean, just wipes them out. They lost by 30.
Oh, no.
It wasn't even close, and it was really heartbreaking to watch because that group of kids had given Coach Yow something that she had desperately wanted, and to do it with one of her teams. And she always dreamed about taking one of her teams to the Final Four. And so everyone was elated. I mean, we were just so thrilled.
Yeah. Were you broadcasting or were you just there?
No, I was on the Westwood One radio call of the game. So I had been calling games all season, but I didn't have NC State on my schedule. So when we got to the Final Four, obviously, I mean, I have a relationship with Coach Yow. I had a great relationship with her. And we get to the Final Four and we do our media responsibilities, you know, the interviews and all the stuff that come with the pregame and everything we do with Westwood One. And I'm talking to her and I've been talking to her, but she knew that I was struggling because she just knew. They get wiped out by 30. The next day, this is the first year that the NCAA gives you a day in between the semis and the finals. Because if you remember, the women's tournament used to be semis and finals back to back. Okay. So now you got this day in between, and they created a senior all-star game. So I'm going to the senior all-star game to watch. I set my stuff on press row and I go see a friend up in the stands. And when I come back, she happened to be sitting right next to me. It was total fate that she sat next to me. So we first started talking about the game, and I felt terrible for how badly they had played. And then she asked me how I was doing. And I said, I'm doing fine. And she said, no, really, how are you doing? And it was that deeper question that brought all the emotion forward. And it was a conversation that lasted the whole game, Scott. Honestly, neither one of us watched the game. The conversation went and started sort of like this. I bet finding out you have a child with special needs is like finding out that you have cancer. It's not something you were prepared for. You don't have the answers. You don't know why. And then she goes through these incredible steps of first you nurse the hurt. You know, you're sorry. Then you curse the hurt. You're mad. Then you rehearse where the empathy comes. And then you reverse. You make a choice that, I'm going to put a game plan together and I'm going to decide that I'm going to beat cancer. And I'm going to be the best mom of a child with special needs. I'm going to be Frankie's best mom that I can be. And that 9 months in after he was born was really an incredible turning point for me. I knew how much Coach Yow cared. And I found out just recently, like a year ago, she had a friend in the special education department at NC State. And when Frankie was born, she called this friend and said, hey, I need to talk to you. Can you please meet me at Pullen Park? I want to meet, in a private place away. And this person who's still in the special education department told me this story. She said, Coach Yow said that she wanted to know from an expert, how am I supposed to help Debbie? What do I say? How do I handle it? How can I help her? What's the right verbiage? How am I not offensive? But what does she need? What can I tell her? And I just learned that all these years later. I used that story one time to introduce her because everyone could look at her numbers and all of the Hall of Fames and Naismith and 737 wins. And I could go on and on about her decorated career. But really, when you tell a story like that about a player who's been almost 20 years removed from playing and to have a 30-plus year relationship with her like I did, I feel so blessed. But you could pick anybody that played at NC State and sit them in this chair, and I guarantee you'd get something very similar. That's how special it was. And not everyone can say that about their coaches or their college experience.
And yet, to go back to your own career, isn't it true that Kay Yow wasn't necessarily going to offer you a scholarship at first?
No, she wasn't. You're right. I had papers from Jennifer Alley in North Carolina sitting on my kitchen table for 2 weeks.
Really?
I went to Kay Yow's camps. I learned when I was 13. my parents took me to Reynolds Coliseum, and I sat on the railing right across from the bench. And that's the first time that I learned girls played basketball in college and you could get a scholarship to do it. Had no knowledge because we had moved from New York, upstate New York. And I did not know. I had no idea. And once I saw that and watched those teams, as much as I loved playing all sports, and I did play all sports through high school, but seeing that and thinking, I think I could do that. Like that could be me. So how do I make myself good enough that she'll want me? And every decision I made moving forward was to try to be good enough so that she would pick me. And I went to her camps. I went to every clinic. I studied what they did. I was 5'10", 125 pounds, skinny. I could barely bench the bar. It was just, but I could shoot it.
Yeah.
And I kept believing if I could just shoot it well enough, maybe she would pick me. Well, I was recruited by just about everybody in North Carolina, with the exception of a couple of places. But Jennifer Alley offered me a scholarship. And Kay had told me that there was another person that they had offered a scholarship to and that they were going in a different direction. Well, that was really
must have been hard to hear.
That was hard to hear.
Yeah.
It was very upsetting. And that's how North Carolina's scholarship ended up on my kitchen table. And I had great respect for Jennifer Alley, who had done an incredible job. But also my high school arch nemesis was going to North Carolina, and she was a great player, Pam Leake. If anybody's listening that remembers Pam Leake, a shout out to Pam. They beat us in the state championship in high school. And
Where did you go to high school?
I went to Cary High, and Pam went to Chapel Hill High School.
Oh, okay.
And Pam's dad, Ernie, and my dad, Paul, worked together at IBM in the Research Triangle.
That's
so
funny.
Pam and I had become acquaintances since then. But I was like, I'll never play. She's so much better than me. If I go to Carolina, I don't want to sit on the bench, but I have a full scholarship offer. And then something changed. The person that they offered the scholarship to didn't accept it. So now that spot is open. And I remember Coach Yow calling me, and I was kind of like, well, because you're feeling like you didn't want me.
Right.
You didn't really want me.
Yeah, you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, a week ago, you didn't want me.
You didn't want me, but now, and I'm like, well, I can go to North Carolina, and I'm thinking, man, if I end up at Chapel Hill and when we get to play NC State, and I loved everything about North Carolina. Obviously, it's a wonderful place, but Kay Yow was the selling point there. That was my dream. And it took a minute for her to reconvince me that all the things that she's like, you have forgotten in a week or two, that reasons why you wanted to come here. And it was like, I remember the call. It was kind of like, Debbie, haven't you grown up wanting to play here? And I'm like, yeah, isn't this your dream to suit up at NC State? And I'm like, yeah. I'm playing it kind of cool, and she's like, well, yeah. Then I was like, yes, definitely. Yes, Coach Yow. It was obviously, you can look back at a lot of decisions you make when you're young, but obviously that's an impactful one for me. And I learned so much from her.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Debbie, let's talk a little bit more about after that conversation with Kay Yow, and you turned a corner mentally, it sounds like, but then there was just the hard work day to day that you and your husband Frank and Frankie all did together, and his two brothers as well. So what did that look like? And was it difficult sometimes to have teachers or whomever else was in this with you buy into it and not be apathetic and say, we're going to put him over here?
Well, every child deserves an education. And when you have a child with special needs, it is a incredibly challenging world to navigate when you don't understand it. Thankfully, my husband and I had experience with education and just, trying to do the right thing. So when we would come together for IEP meetings, I could only take so much of he can't, he won't, he doesn't, he's not going to. And I'd be like, you do not know my child, and you do not understand the things that I see or believe and hope for him. And when we were in elementary school, the biggest piece of criteria for me for a teacher was willingness. You didn't have to have a lot of acronyms in front of your name or after your name. You didn't have to have special education, perfect training, or, be a master in something. To me, it was, are you a good person and are you willing to try? That was the number one thing for me. So when we would come together for our meetings, and I could call a meeting anytime I wanted, and I did call a lot of meetings because I learned so much from my basketball journey, being in the gym with some of the most incredible teachers and communicators and leaders. I'm sitting in practice and I'm listening to Pat Summit. I've experienced Kay Yow. I'm in the gym and I'm listening to Coach Kay. I'm in the gym listening to Rick Pitino. I mean, I could go on and on. I could name drop you 35 years worth of incredible basketball people, coaches, administrators, and teachers, and the way they communicated. And I decided that, you know what? I'm the head coach. I'm going to be the head coach of our team. And everyone on the team has a role. And I'm going to treat it just like I would if I was the head coach. And that's what I did. And so when we would go to meetings, it was really hard for me, Scott, to remove the emotion from it. There were times when I just said, stop. I'm going to go outside for 5 minutes and I'm going to let you all think about what you just said. And then I'm going to come back. I mean, I would do stuff like that. Or I was just very direct. And my husband is a very handsome Italian, but he can give that hairy eyeball with his arms crossed. And I would say sometimes, Frank, just stare at him. He kicked me under the table several times, like, okay, that's enough. Okay, but there's no way that I was going to sacrifice my son in the process of you trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing, right? There is an IEP. It's not a cookie cutter. There could be 15 kids in a special education classroom with 15 different IEPs. So we're all not doing the same things at the same time. And to manage that as a teacher is really challenging. So I get that. And the paperwork that comes with it. But I'm here to tell you that, look, I'm here to help. I'm a resource. What do you need? How can I help you do your job better? There's a wide variety of things that I would do. But I also will give you one quick story. Middle school sucks. It sucks for all kids. I hate it. I hated it for all three of mine. Yeah. But when you have Frankie and you're in middle school, this is a really challenging time for kids. And my worst nightmares were always that somebody was going to pick on him, take advantage of him, not include him. And he is a handsome, smart, athletic, friendly, kind, just happens to have Down syndrome. It never defined who he was. That was our attitude. And that's the attitude that we would use as a prevailing attitude in every meeting that we had. And that's why willingness was so important. But this one particular 6th grade exit teacher going to be back next year. And I said to the teacher, after everyone left, it was just her and the administrator, everyone else left. And I said, you got to pick up your game and I'm here to help you. Okay. You're young, but I think you could be a really good teacher. Now, how can I help you? Now, this is a parent, right? I'm saying this. So could be considered way across the line, but I'm like, you got to know that I'm not Mama Bear and I'm not a helicopter. Okay. But I will be a snowplow. Okay. So I will plow my way through and you will have to get out of the way if you're not going to be on the team. So I'm just telling you, these are the parameters like a head coach. This is the discipline and this is the expectation. Okay. If you can't do it, just tell me now. All right. Because it'd be better serve both of us. And the administrator is sitting right there while I'm doing this. So it's not like I'm telling the person in charge the same things. So 7th grade starts. I was very hands-on, but I would wait a couple of weeks before I would go up the beginning of the school year because I wanted everyone to get acclimated. And I wanted my son to be acclimated. He can do this, and this is what he's going to do. And if he doesn't do it, then you let me know. And anything with an on-off switch, he would lose, which would be devastating for him. So think about it. TV, computer,
My kids
phone.
too.
On-off switch.
It's the most effective punishment. Yeah.
Taking it all away. All right. So 2 weeks in, I'm walking into the 7th grade hall, and I'm walking next to a teacher, and it's great excitement that day because everyone's getting their lockers, right? Now, remember, when you're in 6th grade, you get a locker, but in elementary school, you don't have a locker. Okay. So he's like, yeah, everybody's getting their lockers. And I said, well, where's Frankie's class lockers? Oh, they didn't get them. I said, why not? Oh, well, we didn't have enough. So I said, hold on a second. So let me get this straight. So all the kids got lockers, but the kids in the special education classroom did not get them because you don't have enough. Okay. And as soon as it came out of his mouth, he knew that he was like, oh, I made a big mistake. So I go knock on the door. I said, can you please come outside for a second? So I bring her outside in the hallway. And I said, did these kids not get a locker? No. Why? There weren't enough. I said, I told you that if you needed help and that this would be an example of something that you should fight for, you should have let me know before, because I would come up here and I would make sure that every one of these kids gets a locker, not just Frankie, but all the other kids. And she said, well, I ordered cubbies. They're going to have cubbies. And I said, you realize cubbies are elementary school. These kids are in middle school. Okay. So I said, please don't make me come up here and have to kick your ass. And then I realized as it came out of my mouth, very quietly, because I was in the hallway, that, oh my goodness, I just threatened a teacher. So she said, no. She said, no, we'll try to solve it. We'll try to solve it. Okay. So obviously I crossed the line. So I left. I go home and I realize I should not have said that. I'm probably going to get banned from the school. They're probably going to send the police over to my house. I just threatened a teacher. So the next day on her wish list, she wanted one of those, 80 cubic foot refrigerators that you keep in your classroom. So the next day, here I come down the hallway with a dolly with a refrigerator, wheeling it down the hall right into the classroom. And that's sort of the genesis of how I did business. I did have 2 teachers and a bus driver fired. I never felt guilty about that because that was not my choice. That was theirs. Not this teacher, though. The one you're speaking of. Not this one. Yeah. She quit on her own. Okay. You were an advocate. Yes. And you brought a refrigerator. Did they ever get lockers? They did get lockers. Okay. Because I was thinking they would. Very important part of the social part of what they do. They need to be in the hallway with the other kids, having conversation, learning how to use their locker, and understanding time management. It's much more than having a locker. Right. It's part of the experience of middle school, right? Yeah. Well, that's a great story. Let's talk basketball for 1 second, because you've covered so many games. So tell me, first of all, of 35 years worth of broadcasting, 2 or 3 of the top games you've ever broadcast. Wow. Well, I get this question quite a bit, because when you've been on the air for 35 years, that's a long time for anyone, especially a woman in sports. Mm-hmm. So I'm incredibly blessed and grateful and never take it granted at all. Not one time I've ever taken it for granted. I've never lost my passion for it. I love it. I have been on several milestone games. I've been very fortunate. Jackie Stiles breaking the NCAA scoring record.
Basketball career scoring leader with 3,133 points from SMS, Miss Jackie Stiles.
Pat Summitt winning 900 and then winning number 1,000. I was on the call for those.
Tonight, we have been truly fortunate to witness one of the greatest accomplishments in basketball history. Pat Head Summitt's 1,000th career coaching victory.
Obviously, I want to thank the administration for giving their commitment a long time ago, before it was a popular thing to do, to women's basketball. And what a difference it made.
Gino Auriemma crossing 1,000. I was on the call for that.
Win number 1,000 in the legendary career of Gino Auriemma.
Tara Vanderveer passing Pat Summitt to become the all-time winningest coach. I was on the call for that.
Very long to have a major impact on a ball game. Oh, Fran, another
Do
pick
it,
off.
Fran.
Here comes Believy. Fran Believy, you better believe it, baby.
And then, growing up in the ACC, I wasn't sure I'd ever get to call ACC men's basketball. It was something I'd always hoped that I could do. I grew up on Bones McKinney and Billy Packer and, Marty
Packer and Thacker,
mm-hmm. Marty Brenneman back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to those guys, and I always thought the role of an announcer was to teach. So I've always tried to do that in my broadcasts. But most recently, being on the call of Coach K's last 3 home games, including that Duke-Carolina game, which was, we had a dual cast with ACC Network, and I got to call the game with Wes Durham, who I grew up with, and Mark Packer.
21 Final Fours, 5 national championships, 3 Olympic gold medals, 1 legendary career. Ladies and gentlemen, your head coach, Mike Krzyzewski.
And so in the course of that game and that emotion and that experience, something in sport that I'm not sure we will ever see again, and getting to call a Duke-Carolina game, which was just like, I get the chills thinking about it right now. It is so amazing to think. And that was my 3rd game that day, because I had a doubleheader, the semifinals in Greensboro for the women's ACC tournament. So I called 3 games that day.
Wow.
I can't imagine topping that anywhere.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Do you drive a lot of the places, or are you on planes most of the time?
It's a combination of both. It's a lot of planes. I'm not one that's worried about the frequent flyer miles and all that, because I don't have time to use them anyway. So I'm going as fast as I can to get to the next place, as fast as I can get there.
Martin gets it into Clark. Clark races away, and the mythical mastery of Caitlin Clark continues. Iowa has conquered South Carolina.
And, I don't know how about the print media, but it's definitely true about us on the broadcast side. You sit down to call the game and you're thinking about the game, but you're immediately thinking about how you're going to get to the next place also, because you got another game. So it's absolutely amazing. The pace, the study, being in practice, being around the game day, all of it is worth all the travel.
The travel's got to be the toughest part, though, I would think, or not.
I think travel, it depends on your attitude. For me, I tolerate it because I know at the end of the travel, I get to do what I love. So
the reward is the game.
That's the reward.
Yeah.
The high, calling, like ACC men's basketball is not a training ground. I mean, it is a place that is a reward for a long time career. And I hold that responsibility very high, men and women. The women's product has gotten so good. The players and the league this year in the ACC, the talent that's coming back is just phenomenal. And, I'm fortunate to have an incredible relationship with Caitlin Clark, who's probably the reason why 9.9 million people tuned in to watch. We are going to get to enjoy her at least one more year in college basketball, and she's absolutely amazing. And so, there's so many stories along the way, and so many tales, and so many crazy travel. And there's definitely, when I write my book, there will be one chapter dedicated to the ridiculous travel situations that I find myself in at times, including being rescued by the National Guard one time. So I'm not going to dive into that right now, but there's so much there to unpack. But it's definitely all worth it because it's definitely a love affair with the game.
In women's basketball, I know you've been a advocate for it for decades and played it forever. But you must recognize, I'm sure, that with the casual sports fan, it's really having a moment right now, isn't it?
We all know that there's a white-black issue here. Because the fact of the matter is, when Caitlin did it, people were celebrating it. And they were talking about nothing but her greatness. But then the second a sister stepped up and threw it back in her face, now you got half the basketball world saying, well, you know what? That's not the classiest thing to do. Yeah. That's not the way.
It was the exact same thing.
It was the exact same thing.
It's got a little length to it, right? It's got more than just the event. There's still people talking about the way the Final Four went. And, you know, Caitlin Clark is absolutely amazing. We have never seen anyone like her. And I have seen them all, and I've covered them all. And there are some absolutely amazing Naismith Hall of Famers out there. I mean, to start talking about some of the greats in our game, I'm just amazed at what she's been able to do and how much she replicates Steph Curry and how he changed the game on the men's side, and how I see Caitlin doing a similar thing. I actually DM'd her the other day and said, you better trademark Ponytail Pete. You better trademark it right now, because
good point.
A few Pete years from now, it might mean something, to you. It might not mean anything to you now, but it could.
What was your impression of the post game was that good for women's basketball, the whole thing with this and Caitlin and Reese and all that?
No, I don't think that's great. I'm not a big fan of that. And I'm not a fan of it because every year we talk about sportsmanship being an emphasis in the game, men and women. And we're not consistent about how we go about managing that. And when Caitlin did the cross her face, she claims it was towards her staff. It was turned and spun into something else. But for the way the unsportsmanlike behavior at the end of the game, which I would call it egregious, and I would have, if you're going to give Caitlin Clark a technical for tossing the ball behind her.
That was ridiculous.
Knowing the magnitude of what that meant at that point in the game, like, these are not rookie officials, but it's disappointing because on the 9.9 million rating, I'm estimating in my own intuition that we probably had 5 million new viewers. Mm-hmm. So if 5 million new people tuned in, that's what we got to be better. I say the product is the narrative, and we say all that. And LSU scored 102 points.
It was amazing.
Okay. Yeah. And they scored 85, right? I mean, that's where we should be. Some of the other shenanigans and other antics and stuff like that. I don't mind having characters in the game. I'm not saying that, because if it drives some interest, okay, but not the egregious stuff that took place.
Tell me about 24 hours of nothing but net.
Scott, this is a crazy, crazy idea. I wanted to figure out a way that I could combine a couple of my passions. Obviously, shooting the basketball. I'm still a shooter. I say on the air, shoot till your arm falls off. I'm literally doing that now. And my inspiration by my son, Frankie, and what Special Olympics has meant to our family and families like mine. So I tried to come up with an idea, and what I came up with was 24 hours, nothing but net. It's a 24-hour free throw shooting marathon. 2023 is year 5. So the first 4 years in my driveway, I make 100 free throws on the top of the hour. So at the end of 24 hours, I've made 2,400 free throws. This is an incredible fitness test, physically and mentally and emotionally. I do get AARP mail, but I'm out there sweating it out in my driveway because it's really not about the free throws. What it is a vehicle to share the stories on our 24-hour live stream of Special Olympic athletes, about coaches and actors and entertainers and people that want to share a similar message about trying to help somebody who needs a little more help. And that's what Special Olympics is. It's a great landing spot for families like mine because it helps organize and give athletes a chance to compete. And it teaches healthy lifestyles, and it gives them a chance to socialize and get together. And the competition is real. And my son is a really good athlete. And without Special Olympics, he wouldn't be able to participate in sports at a level that he can participate in. So it has been incredible that in the first 4 years, we raised over $635,000. And I am getting close to $1 million.
Wow.
And 24 hours NBN.com is a place where people can go. And if they just gave a penny for every free throw I make, that's $24. The 635 that we have raised, 635,000 that we have raised, is all grassroots. It's a lot of 50s and 100s and people that I know. I'm using my own platform to try to grow the awareness and to raise some money. And it's an incredible reward. And it's Coach Yow used to talk about rewards and awards. You know, an award's something that can sit on the shelf and you can look at it. But the reward of doing this for people that I know and families like mine that I know absolutely need the extra, it's quite uplifting for everyone around it. And it's a big party now. I mean, like, people are hanging out, lawn chairs, the Special Olympic torch burns in my yard for 24 hours. The Mount Pleasant police run the torch into my yard. We light the torch, and it is a neighborhood event. And it takes me about 15 minutes to make 100, and then 45 minutes of other live stream programming. And it's just been absolutely one of the best things I've ever done. And I had no idea. I wish I'd started it 10 years earlier because I'm going to shoot literally till my arm falls off, but I'm shooting it at a very high clip. So as long as I can shoot it well, because I don't think anybody wants to tune in and watch me shoot a bunch of bricks. But like I said,
what's your percentage?
Well, the first 4 years, my average is 93. So when I turned 50 for my birthday, I wanted a Dr. Dish shooting machine. Most women want diamonds, pearls, and a trip. And my husband said, "You want what?" I said, "Yes, I'm going to use this machine to train because I still do camps and clinics. And I still, I'm going to take it with me and I'm going to help kids learn how to shoot." Little did I know that they would become a great partner of mine in this effort to raise money for Special Olympics. And I use that machine to train myself. And it is, it's not easy. It's getting harder and harder to get ready for the fundraiser, but it's definitely worth it. And I'm so proud of the team that we've built around it to be able to do it. And I have 8 other states that are doing it with me. So I hope this becomes like the polar bear plunge one day.
I hope so too. And it surely should. What an incredible event and fundraiser. And I'm going to be one of your contributors this year and beyond for sure. So thank you for letting us. I hope maybe a few people listening to this will hear that as well. Last thing, let's just tell us a little bit about what Frankie is doing now. I think we didn't quite mention all of the things he's up to.
Well, thank you. I love talking about my family. First of all, my oldest son, Joey, is going to get his master's this spring, so he's going to be finished with his education. And my youngest, Patrick, is a Division II point guard at Emory and Henry University, and he's their starting point guard, and he's a really good player. I always have to throw this little caveat out. He's about 5'11", 6 foot, but he's got a 40-inch vertical, which is legit.
Wow.
So he can really play. And I'm excited about how hard he loves to work and how much he loves the game, too. But my middle son, Frankie, seems to get all the attention. And thankfully, the other 2 boys are so great about it because they are terrific brothers and they're really good young men. And Frankie is a graduate of Clemson Life last spring. Clemson Life is a post-secondary educational experience for students with intellectual disability. Obviously, I mentioned that Frankie has Down syndrome. Life is an acronym. Learning is for everyone. Clemson has the absolutely most magnificent, incredible pilot launch and program that is in the country. It is highly supported by athletics. The leadership from Dr. Clements, the president of the university, all the way through athletics. But Frankie is, to think that he went to college and he graduated is just beyond anything we thought 25 years ago. And right now, he is living at Clemson, same apartment, same roommates, Clemson grads of the Life program. He's working 2 jobs that he can walk to. There's no need for transportation. He Instacarts his groceries. He walks downtown for dinner. And his job, he has 2 jobs, and he works 3 or 4 hour shifts, which is right. It's perfect. Mm-hmm. He was in a fraternity. He was a manager for women's basketball. He played intramurals, and he worked jobs, and he went to class while he was a student. So there's no doubt that he had a full college experience, and with a lot of guidelines and a lot of supports, he's capable. And the wonderful thing is, there are more programs like Clemson Life starting to pop up. Dave Doran, the football coach at NC State, who is a friend of mine, he and Sarah made a $1.25 million gift to the university. It's not for a life program. It's for students that get in and that need some executive management, maybe time management or some organizational skills or some reminders or some redirecting. But they are students that are on campus that just need a little extra help. The life program would be a little bit different, and I am efforting NC State in that direction more than you know. I'll even tell you this. I took Mr. Wendell Murphy to a meeting with me.
Really?
Yes. So I ain't messing around, Scott.
You're going big. Yeah.
Yes, that's going big. That is big when you bring Mr. Murphy. But what NC State has failed to realize is that Mr. Murphy has a granddaughter who's on the autism spectrum, and Jimmy V has a grandson.
I didn't know that.
They would be their first 2 students in an NC State life program. So I'm putting it out there because I'm putting the full court press on them now. Yeah. Now that Coach Doran and Sarah have opened up the door, I think that they need to open it up a little bit wider. Scott, think about all the years you've been to Clemson. I've been going to Clemson for decades and never saw Clemson for the way I see it now. Mm-hmm. And it's such a unique place and such a special place. And I'm so grateful that, like my mom said, we didn't do something wrong. We did something right. And Frankie is all that's right with the world.
That's a great way to close it. Debbie Antonelli, thank you so much for joining us today.
Scott, I'm so grateful for your time. And it's so good to see you again after, crossing in a media room or crossing on press row. But I'm so grateful for our friendship over all these years.
Me too. That's Debbie Antonelli. I'm Scott Fowler, and this is Sports Legends of the Carolinas. Remember, you'll find much more about this interview and about all of our guests, including Steph Curry, Roy Williams, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Dawn Staley, in our Sports Legends book. It's scheduled to be published in fall of 2023. Pre-order your copy now at sportslegendsbook.com. Thanks so much for listening to Sports Legends of the Carolinas, a production of the Charlotte Observer. This show is produced by Lume Ali Sally, Jeff Seiner, and Cotta Stevens. The sports editor of the Charlotte Observer is Lydia Craver, and the executive editor is Raina Cash. Davin Coburn is McClatchy's director of audio. For lots more sports content and to continue supporting this kind of work, please visit charlotteobserver.com and consider a digital subscription. And connect with me on Twitter at Scott_Fowler or email at sfowler@charlotteobserver.com. See you next time.